So let's take a long, slow, deep breath, because I want actually these sessions to be about, so you can hear, excellent. So these paint-alongs are primarily about, it's not just about practicing painting skills, it's about taking some time out to relax and chill. Because it's such a mad world at the moment, and I do have a background as a clinical hypnotherapist, and there is nothing better than completely losing yourself in painting to calm and still the mind. It's fantastic for mental well-being. So tonight we're going to be painting this little boat scene, which is of Dittisham in Devon, from a photograph I took a couple of years ago. This is my little version I did originally in my sketchbook. You should have the reference photograph and the line drawing and the colours in the Google photo album that's in the description. And if you're just joining, do pop over and join our community on School. The link's in the description, where I share other tips and tricks, and we're getting quite a nice little group together, and there's some free classes in there as well. So this is the photograph. Hopefully you've got that ready. I am going to be painting on this Stationery Island watercolour paper. I've used it before for these. It's very reasonably priced, and it's not too, you know, it's a reasonably good watercolour paper for something like this. So I'm just going to check that everything's in screen. It looks like it is. That's brilliant. Okay, so I did suggest initially to people before the live that they did a line drawing beforehand and masked their boat off and maybe their buildings. But I thought it might be useful if I show you how one of the ways I would transfer my picture to my paper. And I'm painting, it's easier if you paint the same size as your photograph, because it makes it much easier to transfer the image. So one of the ways you can do this, and you'd have to have some chalk to hand, which obviously you probably haven't. You could do this with a soft pastel, but if you put some chalk over the background, and I'm probably not going to do all of the bits and pieces, I don't need to. I just want my boat to be in the right place so that I can mask it out effectively. So I'm going to put my paper back down, just move this a bit. And I have a biro, and I am just going to get my boat so it's the right shape, because I did this freehand, and you can see it's actually a completely different shape. So let's get the boat the actual shape I want it to be. You could use charcoal, although charcoal might be a bit dirty. So a soft pastel would work. I'm not too worried about all of the details. I want the shape because I want to mask it. And the trouble with masking, obviously, is we've got to wait for it to dry. So I might just paint round my buildings tonight, as we've been late starting. And that's all I'm going to do, and then I'm going to draw the rest in. So I've got a very faint, which you probably can't even see, but I have a very faint boat outline here, which I can then just go over with my pencil and mask it out. And my little buildings. And it's really to get the scale of those buildings was the important thing. Okay, and that is actually all I'm going to do. I'm just going to put some very faint lines in for some of the, just to describe some of the landscape. And then I've got my breakwaters coming out here, but they're darker, so I don't need to leave anything lighter here. And what I can do at the end is actually use gouache if I want to lighten any of that up. I'm going to paint all of that at the end. Let's just put that in. My water. Just to give me an idea, obviously it doesn't matter if it's not exact. We're not trying to be super duper exact. There we are. And I like the way this leads the eye to the back of the page. That's all I'm going to use my picture for. Now we're going to try and keep the colours simple. Now masking. One of the best ways to protect your brushes, because brushes will get absolutely ruined by masking fluid, is if you have a bar of soap. So wet your brush first. Ideally use a brush that you're not too precious about. But this is a really good tip because it stops you ruining your brushes. Oh, this is a nice mess. Ugh. I love the smell, it reminds me of school. Now, so I've dipped my brush in water, I've put it on the soap. Washing up liquid works as well, and then I'm going to dip it in here. And you need to make sure your masking fluid is fairly thick, otherwise it doesn't rub off properly. And ideally, you don't want to have to dry it with a hairdryer because then it's a bit harder to get off. But you can actually use a hairdryer to warm it up before you rub it off as well. But if you live somewhere warm, like if you're out in the States somewhere, then it will dry quite quickly. So by the time we've painted the top of the page, it will probably have dried. I am going to just mask these, and I will probably paint up to them anyway. But if you live in grey, dull, damp UK, like it is at the moment, it's not always like it was beautiful yesterday, but today it's been really foggy here. But we're right on the coast, so can't have everything. So that's my masking, and then if I wash that off and dry it, my brush has not been impacted at all. This is just a cheap water brush, so that's going to dry while I begin to paint the other area. So we're going to start by mixing up our colours anyway. I have my normal brushes here, which are, I have a big mop brush, but might not use it today. I've got some tissue for drying my brush. I do have a putty rubber, just if I want to lift any of these lines out that I've put on, but to be honest, they're not too bad. I have a fan brush. I have a flat that I've just bought, a flat brush, because I thought that would be good for roofs and things. And then I have a very dinky one, which I think will be handy for the lines. Then I have my 3 like travel brushes that are all rounds, different sizes. Daddy bear, mummy bear and baby bear. And then I have a couple of very thin riggers. And that's pretty much it. I do have a white pen, just in case I want to add some highlights at the end, but I have some gouache paint, white gouache paint. And you can get away with very little in the way of materials when you start painting. Oh, Suzanne, you agreed about the smell of fluid. Yeah, it takes you straight back to school. If you're from the UK, Copydex was what we used to use at school, and I loved the smell. Right, so I'm going to start with my sky, and the colour I suggested for the sky was the ultramarine. So I'm going to mix up some, actually I'm going to, probably cobalt I'm going to go with today. So I'm just going to mix up, like normal, a couple of pools of colour. And I want to stick with a couple of blues to mix my greens so that there's a nice harmony to the picture. And you can see in the picture this is quite turquoise, and so is the boat. But the sky is a completely different colour. But we can use the turquoisey blue and the cobalt, and it will give us a different array of greens in the background and give us some really nice harmony. So I've got that blue. I'm going to mix up a little pile of this cerulean. I had a paint disaster today. I'd put a lot of my tubes into pans, so they were all liquid, and I dropped them and they ran all over the table, which is actually my mother's table. And in my horror, I sat down and I sat on another load of wet pans. So my clothes were absolutely covered in paint. Never mind. I'm going to mix up some lemon. It's just really to get them all getting a bit lively. I have actually had water on these today, so they are already activated. But it's a really good idea, if, I don't think I've got it to hand, but if you've got one of those little sprays. Oh, I have. You can buy these quite cheaply on Amazon, and they're really useful for just spritzing your colours before you start. My bright yellow there. I'm going to use some of my cadmium. Oh no, I haven't got it in my list, have I? No, I've got yellow ochre. So that's my yellow ochre. The yellow ochre is very opaque, but it does make some nice greens. But you have to be, I think you have to be a bit careful how you use it. Right, so I've got my 2 jugs of water as well. I've got a dirty one for cleaning my brush, and then I've got a clean one so that I'm not putting dirty water back in to my colours. That's the word. I'm going to wet some of my paper, but I'm going to leave a little bit for some clouds, and then I'm going to go into my blue. So because some is dry and some is wet, I should have some soft edges somewhere, soft and hard edges. It's quite a dark sky and I want to be quite fast. And actually, that's it, I'm not going to do any more there. I'm going to take my skyline up though, so I'm going to carry on a bit with this blue. And I want to add some lemon into it. I'm going to be painting over it this side. My house is much further over actually. I haven't got room for my trees on this side. I might have to take this tape off because I've not left myself enough room. Oh dear me. I want to add in some other colours down here, so I'm going to get a little bit of my yellow ochre. And if I drop the yellows in first, I can add the greens afterwards. I can add the blues afterwards. And in actual fact, you could pick up a bit of your blue and a bit of your yellow and a bit of your other yellow, and you can let them mix on the page. So I've got three colours there. I've got my yellow ochre, my lemon, and now a little bit of cerulean as well. Go with a bit more blue. And I want some dark, particularly around my houses. This doesn't look like a very real green to me, so I'm going to get a bit more of my cobalt. And I'm going to actually mix the green up here. And to get it looking a little more realistic, I'm going to put a tiny little bit of a dark red in, so it's a bit more of a grey-green. I was hoping my paper would stay wet, but it does feel like it's dried quite a bit, so that's another quite good idea for these, because you can spritz it. And it will spread again. I'm going to pick up some of this because I don't want it to run back. I'm just going to lift up some of this. That does come down. I want something darker in there, so I'm going to go in with a little bit of my cobalt and a little bit of my lemon. I want that darker, then I have to add in a little bit of that red. Just give it some depth along the bottom, and hopefully my paper's still wet, which it does seem to be. There's some darkness along the bottom. And this is still quite wet around here, around my house. Okay. Hopefully that will continue to run. A little bit more a little bit of that cerulean will give me a bit more of a lime green. I want to just touch some of this up. There we are, that mixes with the blue. Oh dear, I think that's false start. It was very discombobulating. That's it. I'm going to leave that. Right, Susanna, I think that's a really good suggestion. Keep 4. I've got 3 pots here, but keep 4 because it is hard to remember to keep one clean. Right, so I am going to come down here and paint this colour along the bottom. So I want a little bit of my yellow ochre. I want it quite thin. I want to warm it up a little bit. So my carmine or alizarin, whichever it was that I suggest, you've got, just put a tiny little drop of that in. That's going to come just along to the end here. And I'm not too worried about it dropping into the just put a couple of other colours in there. There's quite a nice, like a purpley colour. So I've got a little bit of my, very, very tiny little bit of my carmine, and I've just added a little bit of blue to it, just so that I can get some variation on that sea wall. And I'm working on a really small size here, so it's quite difficult to get the colours really right. There's a little bit of grey here that I can drop in, and that's just using my carmine and a little bit of the cerulean. And it's a bit dark for my mud, and I want to warm it up a bit, but that's where I'm going. A little bit more yellow ochre. Test that colour. Yeah, it's all right. I want it to look like it's still sunlit over there. A tiny little bit of yellow ochre. Drop that in. So we should have some variation. And as it comes down, it gets a little bit warmer. Almost pink. So all of my darks can go on afterwards. So what I'm going to focus on now is this area. And my boat's dry, so that's brilliant. So what I want to do with this area, I'm going to clean off all my greens off my palette. And I want to focus on the mud. There we are. So make sure this brush is clean because there was a lot of yellow on it. Yeah, that's okay. And I want to mix up some of these nice sandy colours. So let's go with some of this yellow ochre. It's a bit too yellow, so let's get a little bit of my alizarin-y colour. And then I'm going to use a little bit of my cerulean, so the cooler blue. So that gives me quite a purpley grey. That's actually quite a nice colour for my sand. some places. I'm going to wet this area and I'm going to drop in some other colours, leaving the water. Let's just wet this whole area because I've got my boat masked out. And then let's just drop in some of these colours. So I've just picked up 2 colours on my brush at the same time. 3 colours, so my yellow, my mauve. And you can see how it kind of mixes on the paper. And as it comes down, I wanted a little darker, so a bit more of my carmine and a little bit more of my cerulean to make a purple. But then I need to make sure it's not bright purple, so I'm going to add in a little bit of the yellow. So. And this is going to dry lighter, don't forget. It's going to come out there. A little bit more yellow ochre. Whoop. There we are. Just touching that in. Let it do some of its own thing. Right, I want it a bit darker down the front again. Right, I'm going to let that dry. Clean my brush off. Now, I'm not sure that is completely dry behind there. So, I might well have to use my hairdryer. Got hair on there. Now, my water. So I've got my cerulean. And I want a fairly thin wash of this. And I'm okay with it going over the edges because there won't be hard lines. And I'm just going to drop a little bit of a slightly darker. In a couple of places. That's it. Just as a little bit of variation. Okay. So we've got the gist of it. Now, will this come off? Looks like it might do. If it's still very wet around where you've masked, you might have to leave it for a bit longer. Yeah, I think it probably is there. Now the paint's a bit wet around there, but a good way to get masking fluid off is actually to use an eraser. But don't go over your wet paint, you've got to be very careful. It is much better if you can leave it and come back to it when it's dry. I tried using one of the pens recently and it just didn't come off the page, which was disappointing. Right, Right, so all right, that was dry enough. But if in doubt, leave it, go make a cup of tea and come back to it. I'm actually going to wish I'd put another wash on that before I took it off, but I've done it now, so never mind. It's done. There we are, that's actually not too bad. You do have to be very careful, look, because I'm making the paper damp with my finger. Oh well, once again, learn from my mistakes. That's all right. Now, I'm going to go down a brush. I'm going to go to a very small brush. And I'm going to do, in fact, I'm going to use my flat and I'm going to do these roofs. So I've got some colour mixed up. I've got a bit of my carmine or alizarin, whichever it was. And if I add a little bit of the cerulean to that, I get this nice mauve. And here. Okay, that kind of works. And this doesn't kind of work, but we're going to do that. And I just want to put a little bit of texture in here, just to make it look like it might be a wall of some sort. A little bit of yellow. Now there's a bit of shadow on this side. So my shadow colour is going to be my cerulean. And a little bit of my carmine or alizarin. Kind of lost it over here, inside my chimney. He's disappeared over here as well, but they're all right, they're all right. Not going to get too upset. And they look like houses in the distance, that's fine. I am going to do some dry brush work across here. I'm going to put some of my trees in. I'll put them right in at the edge so you can see how I would do them and bring them down darker. I'll probably end up hiding some of my hiding some of my little building. So I need a green, but I want a fairly darkish green. I'm mixing it a little bit into that purple I just made, and I'm going to go with my cerulean. I want it a tiny bit darker, so oh, I've turned it red. Let's go back to my cerulean and back to my lemon. So it's kind of a green, and I'm going to just Try and leave some of my sky showing through. I want this to look like it's coming out in front of these ones behind. Yeah, that's kind of working. But as it comes down, it gets darker, so I'm actually going to switch to my cobalt. Let's try a little bit of my yellow ochre. Slightly different colour, not a hugely different colour, but slightly. That's going to come all the way down here. And it actually gets very, very dark as it comes down here. So to do that, I'm going to add in some more red. Add some more blue. And that comes across here. I don't want it to be actually black, you see. That's better. That's that. And you can use, if you've got your fan brush, just pick up a little bit of one of those colours. And it's very dark down here. Okay. Now, potentially, what I could do is try a little bit of white gouache to put some highlights on some of my, put some light, very light leaves in. So I've got some white gouache, so I could just try tapping in where maybe there's a little bit of sun poking through. It just gives it a little bit more texture. And at the back, although I want that to look fairly muted, so that's fine. I can always go in and darken that up in a similar way later. What I like to do is get colour across everywhere to start with. I'm going to put a bit more blue in that. I wished actually I had used an ultramarine because it would give me a lot more potential for mixing darks. I'll add a little bit of yellow into that to make it a bit more brown. And it's adding a little bit of warmth into the shadow. Well, just makes it a little bit different. Right, how are we doing? Your masking fluid is grey from Talons. The one I used is Winsor & Newton masking fluid. I think, to be honest, it's a good idea to get small bottles because it can dry out. I had to throw a big clump away that had dried at the top. But I have just this week bought another one, and that I think is also Winsor & Newton, because you can get Winsor & Newton from Hobbycraft over here, and it's quite reasonable and it's really good quality. So where are we now? I may start on my little boat. I'm going to put, first of all, I'm going to put in just a few little trees and things on my houses. just to give that a bit more differential. That needs to be painted in. So I'm dry brushing some darker paint behind the house. Even darker actually. I'm going to get an up. I didn't have ultramarine on my list, but I'm sure if you've got your paints out you'll have it. It's better. Oh dear, I think I will record these in future so they don't go so pear-shaped. So what you'll probably see back, Suzanne, is not this particular painting. I'll probably do another version and then add that one as the recording. Not too bad. Right, I want a little grey. So I'm going back to my alizarin and one of my blues. That's gone purple. So in order to change that down, I want a tiny little bit of yellow. It's got a horrible colour, so let's get rid of that. I've made mud. So I want a shadow colour. I want to put some little windows in. That's my little brush, there we are. So let's try again. A bit of that, a little bit of cerulean. That's too pink, but it's quite a nice colour. So I'm going to add in a tiny little bit of lemon. It's gone brown. Well, let's go back to the blue. I think that will do. I just want to add in a couple of little windows. A little bit of shadow, more shadow line. Now, again, I really want to knock that back a little bit. Fingers are fine. Okay. I'm going to soften some of this. Oh. My boat. Yeah, carmine can be very powerful. Thank you. Right, I'm going to do my orange boy just because I'm fed up with all the other colours. It's quite a dark reddy orange. want one side to be a bit lighter than the other, but that corner down here is quite dark. So let's see if we can add in a little bit of shadow. There we are. I will put the shadow in underneath afterwards. Now my boat, I don't have any drawn lines, so let's see if we can. We've got the buoy here. This comes straight across, so it comes round there. It looks right. Across there, across there, round there. And around there. Now inside we have the seat. It comes up here and across. And at the back, you don't have to paint everything that you can see, don't forget. And this shadow disappears into the bottom. So I'm going to do that turquoise inside. I want my colour to be clean, so I'm going to just dip it out, clean it out with a bit of let's clean this off a bit. I should use a bigger palette when I'm doing it, make life easier. Right. So I want this boat to be nice and bright. So I've got my cerulean, and I want a very, very light wash of it. And I can go darker when I want to. So I can layer this. Okay. The side of it is very dark, so I don't want my blue to run yet, but I want this to be a purple underneath. Yeah, that carmine is incredibly powerful. I'm going to use ultramarine. As I say, it's not on my list. Well, it was actually. I did have ultramarine or cobalt. I'm just using both. Right, that's a really nice deep purple. And I'm going to try that actually, because that looks almost black. And it just disappears into this shadow underneath. I'm going to put a bit more blue and probably a bit of yellow into that so that it looks a bit more sandy. There we are. And that will run into each other across the back. Just watch your angles. This bar comes down at the right angle, and that shadow colour is also, in fact I'm going to join that up. Okay, and a little bit more blue for that oh, I know there's a proper name for them, but it escapes me. Oh yeah. Bit of yellow ochre, my back of my boat. I don't mind if this runs. There's a little bit of very light kind of mauve coming out from under there. And that disappears under there. Okay, I'm going to do my dark bits there, I think, of the breakwater. That's actually, I haven't put that in, that needs to go in as well. It doesn't look very boat shaped. I'm going to have to go in with some white, I think, afterwards. Right, so I am now going to darken up this blue here. So I've got some of this cerulean, but I'm going to add it to a little bit of, no I'm not, that's completely the wrong colour. I'm going to make it from yellow. And cerulean. That's quite vivid. Let's come to a vivid green. Nothing like turquoise, is it? Right, let's just go for turquoise. That's a better one, look. No, my ultramarine, it's got red in it. I'm going to go, let's go back to my cerulean, clean it off. I've got another little bit of blue in there with that. That's a bit better, isn't it? Right. So that's actually quite flat across here. much lighter wash. There. Okay. That. Sort of looking like a boat, but it's not quite the right shape because that edge should be flatter. So I need really to paint up to that edge, which is, and this is the trouble with masking fluid, it's really difficult to get something, get a flat line, a crisp line. So I'm going to have to go back into that one with gouache afterwards, but I quite like my shadows. So I'm going to go back into these dark colours that I've had before, like the brown and the very dark purple, and put some in here. So I've just dropped a brown in, but I'm dropping in some blue as well, so that we've got a bit of variation. And I'm going to bring some of that out there, just so it looks like some sort of structure. I don't want to be too specific. And then down here I want a little bit more shadow. Again, drop some blue in. Okay. Oh, I've got some shadows coming along here because it's where the ropes trailing. So another one going off across here. I'm going to ignore that up there, but I'm going to put a bit more of this wash in here and then put some blue into it, because I quite like the depth of that. That's it. That makes it a bit more interesting and dark. Right. Now my tree again here can go darker. So I'm going back to my ultramarine, because that's my darkest blue. And I'm going to mix that with a bit of lemon, but I want a lot of blue in it. And then, oh, it's going to hurt this, but I want a little bit of this red. There we are, just darkens it a bit. Right. It's slightly darker than the one I had before. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine into that. There we are. That's better. That gives a bit more depth and darkness over what I've already done. That's okay. Bit more blue. So trying to get the values right. If you squint, and you can see where your darkest darks are. And that should bring this forward a bit, making it that much darker. Right. Oh, it's not too bad, is it? Where are we now? I'm going to put another wash of blue over this water, being careful not to disturb the colour I already have down. So I'm just going to wet it and then pick up a bit of clean blue. There we are. some shadows under the eaves of my buildings. So I want that to be more of a grey, so I've got this plummy colour. That's quite a good one. Right across there. I think that's a little bit better. Now where are we? Quite like my boat. I don't like my background, but you can't have everything, can you? So now I'm going to do some dry brushing down the bottom to get some texture of the stones and things. So I'm just going to pick up with my dry brush some of this colour that I've already got mixed. And see if I can, just put some. Now if you're using paper that doesn't have a tooth, you won't be able to do this. I've got some of this grey as well. It's quite a good colour. And up here, got some of this, just some more marks. So it looks like there's a bit of texture up here. Not too bad, maybe. Okay. I want to soften this area. And what I've done is put colour into it instead. That's it. Just want to soften some of this tree line. So it should be a clean, almost dry brush. That's better. Just I've taken that up into the sky now. Oh well. Okay. My boat's looking all right. I'm going to try and go in with some highlights now. Liven it up a little bit. And there are some darker lines sort of along the back. And I'm going to use my white. Let's wipe out a part here. I'm going to use my white to do some highlights now, just in a few areas. Oh, so you bought a tube of turquoise, that was sensible. Thank you, it's coming alive. That's really nice of you, thank you. I think it's so easy to give up, and in my classes I'm always saying you've got to persist, you've got to keep going until you get to something you actually like. Here I think it needs to be darker behind there so that it will stand out more, the white of the boat will stand out more. So I'm just going to go in with a wash across the back there. Oh, dipped into my white by mistake. So a couple of these colours, and I'm actually going to bring that right down. That's it, and then I can make my boat stand out more. That's it. And behind the boat is probably going to be a bit more in shade 2. Yeah, I think that's better. Now, right, I'm going to stand up and have a look. Yeah, this is all a bit wishy-washy at the back here. But I've got my white here and a bit of yellow ochre. So I'm gonna see if we can put some lighter bits in, just in areas. So this orange can actually go darker in one area. It's got quite a strong pop of colour around here. It's quite a red in there actually, which I hadn't allowed for, so let's go with a little bit of red. Now, she says, I am going to what am I going to do? Still think there could be a bit more colour in here. So I am going to go with a little bit of turquoise to see if we can liven this up a bit. I think that's better actually, yeah. And I've got to do this boat. I've just been waiting for it to dry out a little bit. So I need a bit more white. Oh, Teacher Ryder Cove, you came back and you had sound. I went away and started a new one. And I don't know why the first one didn't work because the settings were all the same, but thank you for coming back, much appreciated. Right, so I've got a very thin rigger here and I've got some white gouache and I'm going to try to paint the lighter bits on my boat. If you can hear tippy tapping in the background, it's my dog. He wants to go out. That's it. He's just been, my husband's just let him out. There we are, that's better. That's better. Don't give up, that's the thing. I must be mad really, mustn't I, to put myself under this pressure. But it's fun. Oh, I think I've done too much there again. Under the back. So this is slightly out. Can you see how that is running? Really not in parallel. That's okay. That's all right, I think, actually. And something like that. Got a couple of bits in the boat. That's got a bit more light to it. a little bit of that white and pink on my roof over here. That's better. Tiny little touches, but it's surprising what difference they make. Teeny weeny little chimneys. Actually, they look a bit more realistic now. A bit more white and a little bit more yellow ochre. So it's a thicker mix, so it's standing out a bit more. That's better. What else do we have? I've got some ropes here. And these are blue ropes, actually, the ones that are tying it down. I've got no shadow under that boat now, so let's go back and add that in. And one of the things I'm conscious of is I always stop before other artists do, and then I look at their work and I think, oh gosh, I would have thought that was finished. And they carry on, and then I think, oh no, I can really see why you've carried on. But I always stop too soon. And then I come back to it a few days later and I go, oh, I should have done that. Okay, so that's got its shadow back, which is better. Right, blue ropes. So pure ultramarine, the thinnest brush I can find, which is actually probably still going to be too thick, but let's see. And you need to do it quite fast. So I want to go from there to there. Yeah, it's not great, is it? But never mind. It kind of disappears under the boat somewhere, so we'll let that disappear under there. At the back, it's like there's a fence along, there's a wall along the back. Just going to add a few different colours to kind of highlight that. And it comes right the way along here. A little bit lighter. And I might well let's just add in some light on some of the beach. Okay. Still with my rigger. That should give the effect of a bit of light, catching the beach in the background. And a little, oh, I was going to say a tiny little bit of pink in there, and that's so over the top. That is not what I wanted at all. quite a nice colour though. It's actually a really nice colour, but probably not really beach colour, but it kind of works. Right, now, do I want to just, and it might look ridiculous, but do I just want to put a few little highlights with my white pen, if I can get it working. Maybe it's not working. There it is. Well, I think that's probably, because we've done an hour and a half, so I'm probably going to call it a day there. I will come back to it, I expect, just to finish off. I'm not sure whether this will be the recording that will go out or whether I will create another one. But I have to say, I still sound very calm. Yeah, well, painting makes me calm even when it goes wrong. I still enjoy it. So I really appreciate you hanging on in there with me tonight, because it was very pear-shaped to start with. And I hope to see you again soon. I'm not going to hang up yet, so if you are still painting, carry on. But please feel free to go, because it's late and I really appreciate you being here. Thank you. I do share your work in the school group, the free community. Links are in the description. Come and join us. Thank you. Thanks for coming.